Recap: Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao, Chapter 1139, Chapter 1. The winds of fury had yet to settle when Gan Xian's voice erupted like thunder across the gathering. "How dare you!" she roared, her eyes blazing with humiliation and rage. "You are nothing more than a lowly follower, yet you actually dare to steal my god tool? Are you trying to trample upon the dignity of the majestic heaven sect?" Her accusation was not without reason. One stood as a disciple of the majestic heaven sect, a chosen seed whose talent placed her among the heavens favored. The other, Ling Han, was but a follower, not even a formal disciple, merely an attendant to another seed. By all rights, the difference between their statuses was like heaven and earth, and yet their cultivation levels stood on equal ground. Worse still, she, a seed, had been defeated by him, a mere follower. This was a humiliation too profound to endure, a stain that could not be washed away by silence. Ling Han, however, remained as calm as a tranquil lake beneath the moonlight. A faint smile lingered on his lips as he spoke, his tone steady and without the slightest ripple of fear. "I understand," he said leisurely. "I won, so I took something as my spoils of battle. If you wish to reclaim it, that's simple. Defeat me first." Simple words, yet they struck like a hammer against the pride of every seed present. Defeat me first. Such words had always belonged to the seed-level prodigies, the unrivaled elites of their generation. And now, a mere follower dared to utter them so casually, so arrogantly. Hu Feiyun clapped her hands in delight, her eyes sparkling with excitement. That's right, that's right. This is Ling, Han Lin's spoils of battle," she chirped, her voice adding fuel to the already raging inferno. The air grew heavy. Not only Gan Xian, but all the other seeds now wore expressions of deep anger. Their pride, once lofty and untouchable, felt as if it had been trampled beneath Ling Han's feet. Their gazes turned cold and hostile, like blades drawn in silent threat. Ling Han threw his head back and laughed, his voice ringing clear and bold. "What's this? Are you all planning to gang up on me just because you don't agree? Ha ha, come. I welcome whatever comes, one-on-one or all together. It makes no difference to me. But remember this, if you lose, you must submit to me." His words ignited their fury even further. To be chosen as a seed meant to stand invincible among peers of the same cultivation level. Even if rivals existed, they would only be fellow seeds, never someone beneath them. And yet now, a mere follower stood before them, belittling them without restraint. How could they endure this? These individuals had already been arrogant before entering the majestic heaven sect. Now, as seeds, their pride had only grown more unyielding. Hu Fein continued to clap happily. "Han Lin, you're amazing," she exclaimed, completely oblivious to the suffocating tension around her. She had been raised in indulgence, the ninth king who had never truly learned to read the atmosphere. To her, this was simply entertaining. Despite their fury, none of the seeds stepped forward. They knew the truth. Gan Xian was among the stronger of them, yet even she had been defeated, even after summoning her replica goddess furnace. If she could not prevail, what chance did the others have? Only those at the very peak of the mountain-river tier, those who had formed 5 mountains and rivers, the true king-tier prodigies, might be able to suppress this terrifying anomaly. Without reaching that pinnacle, one could only be called a prodigy, never a king. "Hey!" A drawn-out chuckle suddenly echoed through the air. A thin, frail-looking man appeared silently among the crowd, as if he had always been there. His presence was obscure, almost indistinct, yet even the faintest trace of his aura stirred a deep, instinctive fear within the hearts of all who sensed it. He was a supreme elite. At once, the seeds straightened and clasped their hands respectfully. "Our respects to Elder Hai Yun," they greeted in unison, their voices filled with reverence. This man was a heavenly body tier elite. Though they were seeds, individuals with extraordinary potential, many of whom would one day reach the sun-moon tier and some even its peak, only a tiny fraction would ever ascend to the heavenly body tier. Less than 1 in 10, before such an existence, their pride had no choice but to bow. Elder Hai Yun waved his hand lightly, dismissing formalities. His gaze settled upon Ling Han, and as he observed him, a flicker of surprise deepened within his eyes. Fortunately, his expression was veiled by a swirling aura of primal chaos. Otherwise, the onlookers would have been shaken to their core. A heavenly body tier elite, surprised? "Young man," Elder Hai Yun said with a faint smile, "are you interested in joining our sect? I can guarantee you will become a seed. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Yet, as shocking as it sounded, it also felt entirely reasonable. Ling Han had defeated Gan Xian, a seed, while standing at the same cultivation level. Such strength spoke louder than any title. If someone like him were not accepted as a seed, then what meaning did the word seed even hold? Still, the majestic heaven sect had always upheld its traditions. Recruitment occurred only once every 100 years, and yet now Elder Haiyun was breaking that ancient rule for this one man. Ling Han paused briefly, as if weighing the moment. Then he nodded. I am willing to join the majestic heaven sect. This had always been his intention. Elder Haiyun burst into hearty laughter, clearly pleased. Good, very good, he said, nodding. The rest of you may select your followers. Han Lin, come with me later. There are matters I wish to discuss. Understood, Ling Han replied with a respectful nod. Before a heavenly body tier elite, respect was not merely courtesy. It was necessity. Gan Xian trembled with fury. What could she do now? Ling Han had become a seed as well. The authority of the sect could no longer be wielded against him. No, this humiliation would not be left unresolved. If she lacked the strength, she would seek it elsewhere, from those true monsters who stood above even the seeds. Ling Han swept his gaze across the crowd. Then, without hesitation, he strode forward, toward the man and woman who had stepped forward earlier to support him. The situation had changed. His identity had transformed. Wherever he walked, the crowd parted like waves before a ship. Countless gazes followed him, filled with admiration, longing, and burning hope. They all wished to be chosen. Even many beautiful women cast flirtatious glances, their eyes shimmering with allure. If chosen by him, they would not hesitate to offer even their bodies. To follow a seed-level prodigy was akin to a sparrow ascending a branch and transforming into a phoenix. But Ling Han paid them no mind. He passed them all by, arriving before the man and woman. Hu Feiyan followed closely behind, her boredom forgotten now that she had found someone familiar. Ling Han smiled warmly. Brother, he said, would you be willing to become my follower? And your junior sister, she can follow her. He gestured toward Hu Feiyan. Hu Feiyan tilted her head, glancing at the woman in green. She showed no objection whatsoever. To her, followers were of little importance. Since Ling Han had suggested it, she was more than happy to accept. The senior brother and junior sister were both overjoyed, yet also nervous, their hearts pounding with both excitement and uncertainty. Ling Han continued, his tone sincere. You stepped forward to help me. I cannot ignore such goodwill. For a cultivator, character is paramount. Your actions have earned my respect. The two exchanged glances. Then, as if reaching the same conclusion, they both nodded. I am Fanru, the senior brother said. This is my junior sister, Chen Xiao. Thank you, young Master Han. And he hesitated, glancing toward Hu Feiyan, unsure of her name. She is Hu Feiyan, Ling Han supplied with a smile. Chen Xiao immediately bowed gracefully. Greetings, Master. Hu Feiyan quickly waved her hands and pulled her up. No need for that. Just call me Fei Fei. I don't like being called Master. Chen Xiao blinked in surprise, then nodded, a warm smile forming on her lips. Her impression of Hu Feiyan improved instantly. All right, Ling Han said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Let us enter the sect. His heart stirred faintly as he spoke. He longed to see Shui Yanyu again, and to reunite with his brothers. Ling Han and Hu Feiyan walked side by side, while Fan Ru and Chen Xiao followed respectfully behind. Around them, the other seeds began selecting their own followers. The once tense atmosphere erupted into lively chaos as countless individuals clamored desperately for a chance. After making arrangements for Fan Ru and Chen Xiao to follow Hu Feiyan, Ling Han turned and headed toward Elder Haiyun. He followed the elder to a residence atop the main peak. Clouds swirled around the mountain, drifting like immortal veils. The entire place resembled a heavenly realm, detached from the mortal world. Elder Haiyun stopped, then turned slightly, his gaze piercing through all disguises. This is not your true appearance, he said calmly, his voice sharp as a blade. Tell me, are you being hunted after offending too many people? The moment Elder Haiyun's gaze pierced through Ling Han's disguise, the air itself seemed to tighten like a drawn bowstring. Ling Han's heart trembled slightly within his chest. He understood clearly. Before a heavenly body tier elite, such concealment techniques were like thin mist before a blazing sun, impossible to truly hide behind. There was no point in clinging to deception. Thus he nodded calmly, his voice steady yet honest. My name is Ling Han. While traveling toward the majestic heaven sect, I was ambushed. To mislead my enemies into believing I had perished, I altered my appearance. It was the simplest way to avoid further pursuit. Elder Haiyun listened, then slowly nodded, a trace of satisfaction flickering in his eyes. Had Ling Han tried to evade or twist the truth, the elder's impression of him would have soured instantly. But this young man spoke plainly, without hesitation. Such composure, such clarity, it pleased him greatly. Standing as an elite of the heavenly body tier, Haiyun carried himself with the quiet arrogance of one who had long transcended mortal struggles. To him, most troubles in this world were but trivial ripples on a vast sea. With a confident wave of his sleeve, he declared, "Who dares trouble you? Speak their names. I shall speak on your behalf and ensure they no longer dare target you." His tone was absolute, filled with unwavering certainty. After all, what matter in this galaxy could not be settled by a heavenly body tier cultivator? At least, within this stretch of the cosmos. There was none. Ling Han scratched his cheek slightly, appearing almost embarrassed. I have rather many enemies. No matter. Elder Hai Yun dismissed it with a casual flick of his hand, as if brushing away dust. Ling Han inclined his head and began to list them one by one, his tone calm, almost polite. Great Generals Sha and Zhao of the Chaotic Stars, Majestic Empire, the Eternity Sky Emperor, the Jade Drop Emperor, and the Dark Knight Hall has also set their sights on me. I will be troubling you, Senior. Silence. Then, Pooh. Elder Haiyun nearly choked on his own breath, his composure cracking for the first time. His eyes widened as though struck by lightning. What kind of joke was this? In his expectations, a mere Mountain River tier junior, like Ling Han, might have offended a few Sun Moon tier cultivators. Perhaps even those at the medium or high extreme, that would already be considered impressive survival. After all, if his enemies were any stronger, how could Ling Han possibly still be alive? And yet, what names had just been spoken? Great Generals Zhao and Sha, heavenly body tier elites, the Eternity Sky Emperor, the Jade Drop Emperor, figures whose might shook entire regions, beings he himself did not dare confront. Even he, Haiyun, stood only at the low extreme of heavenly body tier. Against Zhao and Sha, he might barely hold his ground. But before emperors who had ascended through countless trials, whose battle prowess could leap across 4 or 5 stars, he wasn't even qualified to raise his voice. Among immortals, even the smallest gap in level was a chasm, and those crowned as emperors were monsters among monsters. Haiyun stared at Ling Han, his expression turning complicated. Was this youth a peerless genius or a walking calamity? But then a burst of laughter broke from him. Ha ha! His laughter echoed across the air, sharp and bright. A mere Mountain River tier cultivator, surrounded by enemies of such terrifying stature, and yet still alive, still standing before him without a scratch? What did that mean? It meant this young man possessed terrifying ability, and even more terrifying fortune. If he survived, his future would stretch endlessly like the boundless heavens. Elder Haiyun's eyes sharpened with interest. You have formed the 5th Mountain River, haven't you? He asked. Yes, Ling Han replied without concealment. There was no need to hide such a thing. Among true elites, the existence of the 5th Mountain River was no secret. Only in the circles of lesser cultivators did people speak of 5-star geniuses as though they were myths. But what did those people know? In truth, on Joint Peace Planet alone, such geniuses were not rare. These were true 5-star geniuses in power, not empty titles. Even Empress Luanxing herself stood at the level of a 9-star genius. It was simply that ordinary cultivators would never encounter such figures. Take Ling Han himself. Once he formed the 5th Mountain River and entered the majestic heaven sect, he had already stepped into a world far removed from common understanding. Humans believed only what they wished to believe. If someone spoke of 7 or 8-star geniuses, how many would accept it? Elder Haiyun nodded slowly, his gaze growing warmer. Not bad, very good. In the current generation, only 7 individuals have formed the 5th Mountain River. 7. Ling Han's heart stirred slightly. Within this small galaxy alone, there were already 7 like him. And beyond this galaxy, countless others existed across the vast immortal realm. In regions with higher cultivation levels where even stronger beings reigned, how many more such prodigies would there be? The answer was obvious. There would be more, far more. Ling Han's eyes flickered with determination. The path of cultivation was like rowing against a raging current. Advance, and you struggled. Pause, and you were swept backward. Reaching higher realms was already difficult. To reach the peak within those realms was even harder. A 10-star genius in the Mountain River tier might fall to 9, 8, or even 7 stars as they advanced. Who could guarantee eternal brilliance? Go, Elder Haiyun said at last, his tone now more measured. Be cautious in your actions, stay within the sect as much as possible. After hearing the list of enemies, even he no longer dared to claim full responsibility. Some storms were simply too vast, even for him to shield against. Ling Han bowed respectfully, then turned and departed. His residence was located upon White Frost Peak. By the time he arrived, preparations had already been completed. Before him stood a small palace, spacious enough to house over 100 people. Yet now only 2 figures would dwell within its halls, Ling Han and Fan Ru. Ling Han surveyed his surroundings, nodding in approval. The spiritual qi here is already dense, he murmured, and with the formation within this palace gathering it further, this is indeed an excellent place for cultivation. He allowed Fan Ru to choose any room she desired, while naturally claiming the master chambers for himself. Yet even as he spoke, he knew. Compared to the Black Tower, this place was nothing. Within that mysterious realm stood the reincarnation tree itself, a sacred existence that nurtured enlightenment. Without delay, Ling Han entered the Black Tower and began cultivating with full focus. At first, he had felt a hint of pride in his achievements, but now that pride had vanished. 6 others within the sect had also formed the 5th mountain river. Pressure. A heavy, invisible pressure settled upon his shoulders. Even within the mountain river tier, he was not invincible. If he relaxed, if he allowed complacency to take root, others would surpass him. Or worse, the gap between him and true geniuses would widen until it became insurmountable. With a flick of his hand, he took out true origin stones, arranging them into a formation around himself. Instantly, a surge of spiritual qi erupted, dense, thick. It rolled through the air like heavy mist, refusing to disperse. It coiled around his body, pouring into him in endless streams. This was no ordinary cultivation. This was burning resources, consuming true origin stones at a staggering rate. But the effect, the density of spiritual qi here was at least 100 times greater than the outside world. As he absorbed it, refining it into his own power, Ling Han also sat beneath the reincarnation tree, his consciousness drifting as he comprehended the Tao. His thoughts wandered through endless mysteries. I must cultivate and refine alchemical pills simultaneously, he murmured inwardly. Both paths must advance together. Time flowed like a silent river. When night passed and dawn arrived, Ling Han finally ceased his cultivation. He turned his gaze toward Kanya and the others. Among them, Yuan Cheng. He stood out the most. His cultivation had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. If he wished, he could attempt to break into the Mountain River tier at any moment, but he chose not to. He sought stability, seeking to solidify his foundation before ascending further. Ling Han nodded inwardly. There was no rush. Though Yuan Cheng, he was not a top-tier prodigy, reaching 14 stars of power would not be difficult for him. At that point, his battle prowess might even reach 20 stars, enough to be considered a true genius within the immortal realm. Ling Han offered them words of encouragement before leaving the Black Tower. Now he intended to visit Shu Yanyu and the others, but after a brief moment of thought, he smiled faintly. Friends could wait. A lover should not. Thus, he decided to find Shu Yanyu first. Ordinary disciples did not reside upon White Frost Peak. They were assigned to Blackwater Peak, a mountain far shorter, its spiritual qi noticeably thinner. Even as Ling Han approached, he could feel the difference. It was no wonder so many ordinary disciples yearned to become followers of seed disciples. To reside on White Frost Peak was to step into a superior cultivation environment, a chance to rise faster, to grasp greater power. Just as Ling Han prepared to ask someone for directions, he paused, his eyes lit with surprise. What a coincidence! Ahead, a graceful figure walked toward him, her presence like flowing water, her beauty unmistakable. It was Shu Yanyu, and behind her, a man in green robes followed closely. He was handsome, composed, and carried himself with a natural arrogance. His aura was sharp, confident, like a blade that had never known defeat. The air between them seemed to shift, as if an unseen tension had begun to stir, and thus another chapter of fate quietly unfolded.